We've now become anxious about the things that we have. We suffer with our possessions even more than we suffered without them. Hello, I am Brother Francisco Whitaker, Benedictine monk of St. Vincent Arch Abbey in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and you are watching The Benedict Project. Today we are continuing our discussion on monasticism and the 7 deadly sins, how St. Benedict and the early monastic fathers can help us in our struggle with sin. Today we will be speaking about our 4th principal vice, the sin of avarice, or as we might more commonly know it as greed. In the past couple weeks, we spoke about gluttony, then lust, and sloth, and how there was a kind of sequential order by which we fell into sin by first giving into gluttony, followed by lust, followed by sloth. But today, we experience in avarice a rather shift of sin to becomes a greater threat and something much more pervasive in the person. But before we get into that, make sure you give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss any of our awesome content. So the sin of avarice. St. John Cassian, one of the early monastic fathers who actually wrote before St. Benedict founded the Benedictines, speaks about avarice as a vice distinct from the other vices of lust, sloth, and gluttony that the person gives into. He says that those, while of course sins, are born out of something that is still natural to a person, right? The natural drive for sexual intimacy, the natural drive for food, and the natural drive for rest. He says, though, that avarice or greed does not come out of a natural desire. Because when we have our needs satisfied, if we are content, we won't need more. We won't want more. But, he says, avarice is born out of an unhealthy desire to have more than I need. So that it becomes not a twisting of something that is natural, but in fact, a unnatural twist of the will. So, in order to speak about avarice, we're going to tackle it today by first talking about what it is, how it comes up, what its effects are, and then how we can answer it. So, let's get to it. So, what is avarice? Well, just like the other sins we've talked about being an inordinate desire of or use of more than is necessary of any given thing, avarice or greed is the unhealthy attachment and desire for material possessions and wealth. And if you think about it, unlike food or drink, or even between certainly married persons, but even natural to any person that desire to satisfy intimacy, the need or the acquirement of possessions is something completely external to the person. So that a desire or a need, an inordinate love for possessions, is born out of a choice that says, what I have is not enough. Therefore, I need something else to satisfy. So I, in my will, say, that which is outside of me, that is what I deserve. Avarice of Pontus, another monastic writer, says that this twisting of the will is born out of 2 things. First is fear. Fear that what I have will eventually run out. So I have to kind of amass or store up things in order that I will always be safe. I will always be comfortable. It's kind of taking a survival instinct, but taking it to an extreme level. Because it says, well, even if I'm okay right now, I never know if that will always be the case. So I have to make sure things are good all of the time. But he says it's also born out of a fear of losing independence and losing usefulness to others. Because especially, think about it, in our culture, wealth or status are the mark of people's popularity or their usefulness to society. Utilitarianly, if you have wealth or you have things, you can support more people. You can help more causes, whatever it is. And if you don't have something, you're lacking. If we're lacking, we become dependent on others. And if we're lacking, we might not be the first people someone turns to for help. And if we use our wealth for the support and generosity of others, then that's a good thing. But avarice is not born out of generosity. We don't get things in order to give them to others. Avarice is, I don't ever want to have to depend on anyone. And I always want to be known as the person that is most useful, that is always the best person to turn to in every need. I want to be the answer to my problems and to everyone else's problems. So the best way to do that is to gain wealth, to gain possessions, to hold. Well, the problem with gaining more and more things is that as it piles up as possessions or money, or even other things like affirmations, popularity, as those grow, they are never satisfactory in and of themselves. So we continue to demand more and more. So that, as John Cassian says, greed grows in the will and in the heart, and then says, what I have is not sufficient. Not only is it, oh, well, I don't have enough to make me happy. It's, I don't even have enough to be sufficiently content. So we increase the amount, but then lower the gratification of it, so that it constantly becomes a widening of the gap of what we have and the needs we need to satisfy. So that's what avarice is. Now, what does it look like? How does it pervade itself in our lives? If we give into greed, to constantly needing, what are the consequences? What does it look like? Well, John Cassian says that there are three manifestations of avarice, or there are three types of avarice that a Christian can fall into. So first is greed and hoarding. So that always being afraid, like John Cassian and Avarice both point out, of losing something or losing what I need. So it's this constant hoard and amassing of everything. We hoard and hoard and hoard. We hold on to more things and we become afraid of losing any of them. So that we become anxious about the things that we have rather than the people around us, the state of our souls. Everything becomes dependent on the state of our possessions. So that if any of them are at risk, or I might lose one of them, or someone wants what I have, I'm immediately thrown into a conundrum. Well, this hoarding then becomes the opposite of generosity. So that even when we see other people who have desperate needs, we refuse to help them. And Benedict points out that avarice or greed in a monk makes him unresponsive to the needs of others. It's kind of like sloth in that sense, but sloth is not desiring to be motivated to do spiritual things or service to other people because there doesn't seem to be anything good in it. Versus avarice, it's, I can't help people because then I might risk losing the things that I have. Well, the second type of avarice that John Cassian points out is particularly a problem for Christians who have actually given their life to following Jesus. They choose to be disciples, but then they regret the consequences of discipleship. So that Jesus says, if you want to follow me, first sell all your possessions, give them to the poor, and then come after me. Well, John Cassian says that a monk or a Christian who chooses to follow Jesus, but then continues to live in the past of what they had, regretful that they gave up their fancy sports car, or that I had to let go of the house that I lived in before I joined the monastery, or anything that you had to give up possession-wise, fame-wise, popularity, friendships that were probably not good, but they were beneficial. Regretting giving those things up for the sake of Jesus. So this kind of avarice doesn't necessarily mean that we're amassing things, but it's still a core belief of the will that those things would make me more happy than Jesus does. And finally, John Cassian says the third manifestation or third type of avarice that a Christian experience can be seen in a fear or a distrust in the providence of God. And it becomes an overdependence on oneself in order to be sustained, content, happy, nourished, anything. He connects it actually with pride, which says, oh, well, I am all that's necessary. I can take care of myself. I'm my own God. Well, avarice says, I can't trust God to actually take care of me at all times. He is good, but is he good enough? It seems that if I have these things that make me comfortable, if I have enough money so that I never have to worry about tomorrow, I'm not living paycheck to paycheck, or I have all of the possessions that are what I need to feel comfortable, to feel content, to feel like I'm keeping up with the Joneses. Anything that we place as necessary for happiness other than God is both a pride, a distrust in his providence, but also a creation of an idol. Because anything other than God that we become dependent on is a god to us. That's why the love of money becomes the root of all evil, because the love of money creates in us a need to depend on ourselves rather than on Christ. Well, an effect of this avarice in our souls, Avarice says, is that we become sick and suffering, in fact. So in a kind of a crazy twist, we believe that possessions or that wealth will make the suffering or the discomfort we have in our life go away. But in fact, Avarice points out it becomes a total flip, because we've now become anxious about the things that we have. We suffer with our possessions even more than we suffered without them. So that the more we have, the less we're relaxed, the more stress we have, the less we're dependent on God, the less we're able to interact properly and generously with others. Because everything now becomes a risk and a threat to my security and the things that I have. Well, okay, then what's a cure for avarice? What's a cure for greed? And there are two, both given by St. Benedict and Avarice, and those are simplicity and almsgiving. Benedict says that a monk must live simplicity, and I truly believe that if we're following after Jesus, who himself lived a life of total simplicity and radical poverty, if we are Christians, followers of Christ, we also must all live simplicity. According to, of course, our state, right? If you're married and you have 6 kids, your simplicity is also dependent on taking care of the needs of your children. But extravagance is to have more than is necessary to take care of needs and to be sufficiently taken care of. So what is simplicity? Well, simplicity is to be okay with the minimum. To look around and say, I don't need more than this. My needs are taken care of. I am satisfied. What else do I need? Nothing. Are there a lot of things I want? Sure. But do I need them? No. And simplicity is the attitude with which we accept that truth and live it. And a great way to practice simplicity is maybe like the next time you go to the store and you see something like, oh, that would be really cool. I can afford it. I could use that. That might be useful. Is don't get it quite yet. Leave and see how your life is that week. If you're crazy and thinking about, I must have that, then you definitely don't. And then if you don't, and you realize I'm not thinking about it at all, guess what that means also? You don't need it. Simplicity can be practiced more than by just getting rid of all of your stuff, but by when something is presented to us as desirable, as maybe useful or necessary, that we first turn it over to prayer and God and say, is this really what I need to flourish? Because probably not. And then the second way to heal avarice and greed in our souls is to practice almsgiving or generosity. We hear the word almsgiving almost solely in Lent, but it is really something that we should be giving all of the time. Something from our possessions, something from our wealth, something that it might be difficult to part with, but which, by all rights, others need more than we do. It's a matter of justice to give to those who have less. And Jesus says in the encounter with the widow in the temple that it doesn't mean we have to give much, but we have to give out of the heart. Something that gives us a little twinge of sacrifice or a little twinge of feeling like we let go of something. That's almsgiving. And maybe for you, giving money or wealth or those kind of things is easy. And while I certainly encourage you to keep on doing that, maybe have a different kind of almsgiving. So that something sometimes even more guarded than wealth and possessions is our time. We can be very greedy with our time. So that me time, right? I just need to relax. I need to veg. This is my time. I spend too much time at work with other people, or I took all day taking care of the kids. I need to relax. And yes, we need times to recuperate in order to not be jerks to everyone all of the time. But when our need for, just chilling, having a glass of wine, whatever your mode of relaxing is, whenever that becomes to the detriment of helping others because we don't want to sacrifice our precious time for their needs, it becomes greedy. So, how can you best practice almsgiving? Whatever the thing you want to give up the least, or you're most afraid to lose, that's what you need to give to someone else. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, please share it with someone. Keep on following these next couple weeks as we tackle the next vices. Next week, we'll be looking at envy. So make sure you stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed it, you can check out our other videos on the 7 deadly sins. We got our video here on gluttony, lust, and sloth. So check them out. Thank you for joining me. I am Brother Francisco. Have a wonderful day. God bless.